Welcome back to the Megatherium Club podcast, everybody. My name's Sean, and I'm here with Spencer. How have you been, man?
Pretty good. My season is about to start to ramp up considerably as I am a director of a summer camp. And
Oh,
summer is upon us. It is here.
now is
So
this like
next,
this? Is this a summer camp you see in movies where it's just like
yes.
everybody's making out,
Yep.
behind the
Yep.
counselor's back, or is
Yep.
this like
That's
single
exactly right.
sex?
And also the
Stuck in the...
counselors are making out with everybody
Oh,
behind
perfect.
their backs
Hopefully
too.
not children.
Oh, no. Not with the children, but with themselves. So,
Even better.
or else I'm going to have so many more issues this year.
Gotcha.
So,
Okay. Yeah.
yeah, but it's my first season. I'm nervous. It starts on Saturday. That's when training starts. And then the next like 2 weeks after that is just basically training and a lot of fun. And then it's chaos until August.
Nice.
So yeah, it'll be a blast. So
Hell
what
yeah.
about you? How are you doing?
Dude, working like a dog, but it's good. It's fun. It's peak of wildlife season in people's homes. It seems like so. I'm helping remove a lot of raccoons, possums, bats, fox, insects.
Okay.
I work with all sorts of what we call nuisance wildlife these days, birds,
Yeah.
and they're all ramping up their breeding season, which means they're in our homes more. So it's been fun,
Good.
dealing with all these new challenges of it's like a new side of pest control, but it's wildlife control, I guess. So
Yeah.
it's cool.
My two buddies in Iowa are both struggling with different things, but both things related to that. One of them has an evidently a big gopher problem in his backyard that he's been trying to take care of, but the gophers are winning. And the other one has got termites. So they have found their way into the structure of the house, and so he's been battling that for a couple weeks, trying to get different companies to come out and do something about it. So
Oh, yeah.
I told him, I said, I'll send Sean over and he'll take care of it right then and there for you.
Well, yeah,
He'll do it for free too.
I don't do anything for money. It's all out of the goodness of my heart.
That's right. That's right. Excluding this podcast, because this makes us a lot of money.
This, yeah, this puts me negative. So this is
It literally does.
no.
So,
This is probably one of the two things I do out of the goodness of my heart. Well, today's episode may be one of the most metal episodes we have recorded, in my opinion. We're going to be talking about the necrobiome. This was a newer term for me after hearing it in the Crossings book I mentioned in the last episode by Ben Goldfarb. There was a chapter or two focused on roadkill, since the book primarily is focusing on roads and how they impact wildlife. And of course, things get hit by stuff on roads, cars. The necrobiome is a community of species that assist the decaying process of an organism after its death. These species include a variety of different types of organisms, including fungi, bacteria, insects, nematodes, other invertebrates, as well as larger scavengers with backbones, or we call them vertebrates. We have probably already mentioned some organisms in previous episode that fit this category, like the American burying beetle. Can you think of any others, Spencer?
no, that's the only one that I can ever think of.
Oh, yeah, that's
I was gonna bring up the old thing that we learned long ago, that T-Rexes were exclusively scavengers.
we learned that.
It's not. You didn't learn that at some point? I remember in the early 2000s
Oh.
there was this like big thing that T-Rexes weren't these massive carnivores; they were just scavengers,
Oh,
and
yeah,
everybody's
yeah.
like, "No."
Yeah,
No.
I do remember that. They're like,
Yes.
there's no way this thing was an active hunter. I thought you meant in a previous episode, and I was like,
Oh no.
that seems like fake news.
No, we've talked about T-Rexes before, obviously, and I was going to bring it up
Yeah.
in that context. But but no, they were vicious carnivores.
But
and nothing
that
else.
does eventually. We'll get back to that topic actually, because I do briefly talk about that. So. But side note, the necrobiome is an important part of entomology, specifically forensic entomology, as it is useful to know how long a body has been dead to determine the cause of death and such. Various insect life cycles involved in the breakdown of the body can determine not only when the body died, but also help determine how it died or how the victim was killed. Stepping away from entomology, though, oddly enough, as two entomologists talk on this podcast, I wanted to talk about one of the most metal birds out there. We may see cousins of this scavenger all the time, daily, in fact, but this one species stood out to me, and I wanted to discuss it further. I'm talking about the bearded vulture, Japetus barbatus. Cool scientific name for sure. If that's not how you pronounce it, I don't care, because that's Japetus barbatus. That's great. Is this something you were going to talk about?
Yeah.
No way.
Yep.
Gosh. Dang it.
You know, when you texted yesterday and said, I hope we don't have any crossover, I texted back, I was like, I don't think we will. And then I was like, I'm pretty sure we're both talking about this bird. But I'm so glad that you were the one to go after the scientific name. I looked it up. I wrote it out phonetically. I was like, I still don't want to be the one that says this.
Dude, I think this is one of the easier ones we've had on the show.
True, but I'm also that terrible.
Oh, well, record shows we're both pretty bad at scientific names, and honestly, I have one later that I practiced. Guarantee I still mess it up.
Yeah, I'm excited. All right, but continue.
Yeah.
We'll compare notes now.
Yeah, now we could just open discussion, I guess. So the bearded vulture, Japetus barbatus, aka the lammergeier or ossifrage. This bird is native to mountainous areas of Asia, Europe, and even parts of Africa. They have two subspecies, Barbatus barbatus, that lives in northwestern Africa and southwest Europe, and Barbatus meridionalis. Meridionalis? Yeah, there we go. See, we're already not doing good.
It's the usual. It's okay.
That lives in southwest Arabia, eastern Africa, and South Africa. These birds have a wingspan ranging from 7 feet 7 inches to just over 9 feet and weigh up to 17 pounds. So,
you know, I knew they were big birds. I didn't think they're big birds.
They're pretty big. 9 feet. Jeez, they're up there.
But anyway, continue.
What I was going to say is 17 pounds. That's smaller than my dog. And my dog is a small dog. I mean, you're like, yeah, duh, Sean. Dogs are 80, 90 pounds. No, sorry. I have a 23-pound mini cattle dog. And
the cat.
Yeah, it's like a big cat, and apparently these birds weigh less than that, but they do have to fly. But I guarantee this thing could pick up my dog and take it away.
Yes, yes, it could.
But even their average weight is closer to 13 pounds, so even less. Bearded vultures do not have a bald head like the vultures we have here in the States, though. And side note, I should have explained this maybe a bit earlier, and I thought this was pretty cool because I didn't know this. Old World and New World vultures. They're different. So Old World, Asia, Europe, Africa. New World, the North America, South America species. So bearded vultures are an example of Old World, while turkey and black vultures here in the States are an example of New World vultures. Side note to this side note, do you have black vultures up where you are now?
I don't know.
I feel like they're more of a southern species. I know I never saw them back in Indiana or the Midwest, but down here, I rarely see a turkey vulture. Black vultures are everywhere, and actually we get calls because people do not like, a dozen or more turkey vultures just roosting on their house. Their poop is everywhere. And one of the weird ways to repel these vultures is you hang a decoy vulture upside down from your house. And it has to be upside down. I do not know. It can't be laying on the ground, can't be head up. It has to be upside down and hanging. I don't know if they're like, oh, holy shit, dude, look at that house. They got some witchcraft going on over there. We cannot hang out here. This is
if I saw a house with a dead human hanging upside down from it, I probably wouldn't go in.
Oh, for sure not. I wouldn't
I get it.
Go to that neighborhood, but
it's effective. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's what we recommend and we can install for people. But like, it's just
That's super weird. Yeah,
I
okay.
wish it worked for like a lot of other wildlife because then it would be super easy. But
Then everybody's houses would look like butcher shops.
yeah, maybe some HOAs wouldn't appreciate that, but they would also
Yeah.
deal with a lot less wildlife
Right, yeah,
problems.
yeah, yeah. Interesting.
But
Now, wait, real fast.
yeah,
You said that their head is feathered.
it is
That's
feathered.
so weird.
Yeah, it's almost like it's bearded.
Whoa. Now, why aren't other vultures' heads feathered?
Turkey vultures and stuff usually have that clean shaven look because it gets the ladies. No, so it's easier to clean, or so the thought, right? Or is that what you're gonna say?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's just if you have less feathers to gunk up when you put your head inside of the stomach of an animal, then you have less gunk on your feathers because you have no feathers, so you're cleaner.
True. And as you guys have seen around here, or if you've seen around here, not bearded, turkey and black vultures do not have feathers on their head. And for anybody curious what a black vulture looks like that lives in the Midwest and has never seen one, just think of a turkey vulture with a black head.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I looked up pictures of it. They're evidently, to answer your question, there's been a few of them spotted in Southwest Mass, which is obviously the lowest part of the state that you can go, but they're super duper rare, and they're not going to be where I'm at out on the Cape here. So
Gotcha.
Just the turkey vultures, which I have seen. So
Gotcha. And so turkey vultures and black vultures are examples of New World vultures. And the turkey and black vultures are an example of convergent evolution when compared to bearded vultures, meaning that they are not related and have evolved to look similar and fall into similar niches, aka the necrobiome scavengers. And obviously they look similar, but some have feathers on their head. We just discussed this. Old World are cousins to eagles and hawks, while New World are related to water birds like herons. I thought that was pretty cool. Did you?
I did not know that. Huh.
And now I'm thinking
Herons.
what?
Herons is not what I would have pictured.
Yeah, and maybe that was just the example provided, and I'm thinking of
Right.
other herons, but the New World don't have strong talons like the Old World. The Old World ones are related to hawks and raptors,
Right.
so they have some
Right.
really powerful claw feet talons, and the New World aren't related to them, and as you can imagine, a heron or any waterfowl type bird doesn't have very strong feet, which makes
Right.
sense. Like these turkey vultures around here, they just kind of have some perching feet. You don't ever see them just carrying things usually.
Right. I don't think I've ever seen one carry something.
Yeah. New World can kind of run like a chicken, but the old cannot. They kind of have to hop or fly, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the New World lack a voice box and can really only hiss or grunt, unlike the old ones. So definitely a difference there, and I thought that was rather interesting going into this. New World, Old World stuff always fascinates me. But as we mentioned, the bearded does not have, or they do have, wow, I keep getting mixed up. Bearded have feathers on their head, which are kind of cream and color, with the face having a black band that transitioned into this black beard under the chin, and hence its name. The neck has some darker cream or orange coloring, and the wings are dark. Of course, like other vultures being part of the necrobiome, bearded vultures help with the decomposition of dead organisms, with over 90% of their diet consisting of mammals. But what makes this vulture stand out from the others, for me, is that 85 to 90% of their diet is the actual bones and bone marrow. The actual meat and skin make up only a fraction of their diet, and funny enough, their chick's diet consists of a higher percentage of meat and skin than the adult's diet. Bearded vultures are specialized to feed on bones, which makes them even more impressive in the necrobiome than many other scavengers in my mind. They will swallow bones if small enough, and if they aren't small enough to gulp them down, they have learned to either smash them directly onto rocks, because they have a pretty powerful neck, or fly up high using their strong talons and drop them onto rocks to make them more manageable. To swallow a whole bone and be able to dissolve it, these birds must have a very acidic stomach acid. Humans have a stomach acid around 2 pH. Maybe, and I've seen some places say like 1.5 to 2 pH, whatever. Bearded vultures' stomach acid is about 0.7 on the pH scale. That is more acidic than battery acid. Not quite as acidic as hydrochloric acid, but not far off. And when I first read this, I was like, sure, yeah, higher acidity required for digesting bones. That makes sense. Got it. But then I wanted to know why that is. Long of the short, bones are made of a protein called collagen that is hard for enzymes to break down. So without that additional acidity, it wouldn't be possible. They do prefer bones with a higher oleic acid and more bone marrow as compared to smaller bones that lack these important nutrients. So there's plenty of small bones in the body if you're thinking of like your ear bone, maybe some wrist bones, but they really like these longer bones that have lots of bone marrow in it. And if you have ever seen a video of them swallowing a bone, it's like those magic shows where with the sword swallower, except it doesn't come back out and it's just eventually dissolved and excreted out. The other end, not the mouth.
Yeah.
Like their eagle and other raptor cousins, bearded vultures will also actively hunt and kill live prey, using the same bone-crushing methods of dropping them at high elevations and watching them smack a rock. These include tortoises, hyraxes, hares, marmots, as well as larger animals such as goats and ibexes. So coming back to my dog, they could for sure take my dog away if they can take goats away. Even some tortoises. I don't know how big the tortoises are over there, but some of them are pretty hefty. As far as their conservation status, their populations have declined vastly in recent history, with areas of Europe being more drastic than areas of Asia and Africa. Collision with energy infrastructure, i.e. power lines, is one of the big factors at play here, along with less available food, trophy hunting, and poisons left out for other carnivores. Healthy numbers of these birds live in the Himalayas and were reintroduced into the Swiss and Italian Alps, but they are most common today in Ethiopia. There are efforts to prevent collisions with power lines today, but I could not find exactly what they are, and Spencer, you can stop me if you have heard anything. They have also implemented secondary feeding sites to keep these birds away from humans and possible poisoning incidences. Yeah. And these birds have cultural importance throughout history with various cultures, but to add to how metal the bearded vulture is, these are some of the birds that people in Tibet feed their corpses to in a ritual called sky burials. These vultures are also blessed during this ceremony or offering. This is an act of generosity by the deceased and the surviving relatives, because they're the ones hiking the body up to these mountain areas, because they provide food and sustenance to other beings. This is called Jator. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. And these virtues are important in Buddhism. Honestly, sounds like a cool way to have your remains put to use, and I'm on a sky burial.
Yep.
So, what did you find that was different? Did you how'd that match up?
I mean, you hit on every single thing that I was going to talk about. I was just going to mention that I think that the earliest that they kind of can find some of these types of things, at least in the modern sense, is dates back to the Pleistocene era, which is totally appropriate for our podcast.
Hell yeah.
So they've been around for a long time. It's quite interesting to think that, despite the fact that these birds are pretty much the only birds that still do this, but they've been doing it for that long, or, similar species, means that, it may be a little out there, but it works, and it's worked for long enough to have its own ecological niche, I guess.
Yeah. So. Yeah, I wonder why it's so hard, or why so few animals out there are like designed for bone eating.
I mean, I was trying to think about this, because I was also going to talk a little bit about bones. we typically see bones a lot out in the forest, right? If you're hiking around, yeah, you might find a dead carcass, but the meat is going to be already probably being decomposed by everything that you've mentioned already. But then, what you might find are the bones. But even when I was working at the field station or all these other places, the bones are constantly still being used. They're just broken down a lot slower. So many animals, even ones that we generally think of as herbivores or strictly vegetarians, like a squirrel or something like that, although I think most of us now know that squirrels kind of eat everything. But they'll go up to bones and they'll just chew on the bones. And that's because calcium is pretty rare if your diet is mostly plants. And so they're using it to get much needed calcium for their body. But yeah, I mean, you have to be big enough at some point to be able to process enough bones, or at least the bone marrow, because that's the real portion. If they were just eating the bones, then they'd be eating all the tiny little hand bones and finger bones and blah, blah, blah. But they want that bone marrow. And I just don't think that there are too many animals that are like, you know what? Here's an ecological niche that is open. And I would be better at this than hunting. So let me just solely focus on the bone marrow. I don't know. I think it'd be kind of cool if more animals did that, but I just don't see too many selective pressures for it. I'll hop in. So let me give you a hypothetical situation. So say there's an entomologist hiking through the rainforest of Central or South America. Let's just call him Sean for whatever reason. So, Sean decides to lick a poison dart frog and falls over dead. Within minutes, an array of animals show up to start taking their fair share of Sean. But eventually, an unlikely visitor shows up. And it's not just one. It's a small army of this. And
women?
Of women, yeah.
Nice.
Of women. And they show up, and they're all sisters to each other, and they're all working hard. These small little things are small little kind of brownish black insects with 4 pairs of wings that kind of look like a little bee. And that's exactly what they are. They're bees, but they're not honeybees. They're not bumblebees. They're stingless bees. And they start to show up and they see Sean's big, beautiful blue eyes. And that's where they start. They fly in and they just start chomping.
On my eyeballs?
On your eyeballs, through the eyes, and into your head cavity, where they start just using their specialized teeth to kind of start taking and swallowing little chunks of meat from what was once Sean. And eventually they fill up their crop, which is kind of an area before their gut. And yeah, but they have some room. Now, you're probably familiar with honeybees. They go around visiting flowers, and while they're doing that, they're also picking up pollen. Some of that pollen is used to pollinate the flowers that they are gathering the nectar from, but a lot of that pollen is collected in these baskets that are attached to their hind legs, kind of made up of lots of little hairs. Well,
what are those called?
Baskets?
The pollen baskets. Corbicula.
Oh, okay, Mr. Bee person. Yeah. I don't want to bleep anything out. Yeah, okay. Mr. Fancy Pants over there with your
sorry
fancy word for pollen baskets. I like pollen baskets. I'm going to use pollen baskets. Well, anyway, these bees, they don't have these, what'd you say? Corbicula. I did know that at some point. But anyway, they don't have these specialized versions of that. They have small ones, enough to carry maybe a small extra chunk of Sean away. So once the sisters are done processing to their fill, they fly back to the meat processing plant, the hive, to process said meat. So what am I talking about? I'm talking about, of course, the vulture bee, or the carrion bee. Carrion just means meat, dead meat, rotting meat. Vulture, we've talked about a lot of those so far, so we have an understanding of what that is, something that scavenges, right? So that's exactly what these are. These are bees that scavenge on meat. And so there are 3 known species of vulture bee, all belonging to the genus Trigona, which is a larger group of stingless bees that can be found out throughout the tropics. But these 3 specifics are only found in Central and South America. And I'll dive into a few of the species in a little bit. But let me talk about some general characteristics that all of the different species share. So our typical bee, our typical honeybee, right? The ones that are so important. Or just even our native bees and our native bumblebees. They're vegetarians, right? Well, they take pollen and they take nectar for food. The latter being, or that would be created or does create honey, through constant regurgitation into each other's mouths, where it's then dehydrated a little bit more, some extra stuff is added, and eventually is put into a little pot, and you have some honey. Well, a similar type of thing happens with one of the species of bees, but again, we'll get into that later. So let's talk a little bit about the gut microbiome. I didn't want to look too far into the bumblebee side or the honeybee side, but essentially, if you were to take the gut biome of every single vegetarian bee, honeybee out there, you're basically going to find the same 5 microbes. They're perfect for what they needed to. They can process or help the bee process the sugary syrup that comes from flowers and or the pollen. However, with our meat-eating friends, they have a really acidic gut biome that's created by mostly one type of microbe, and that's something called lactobacillus, which is super common, not only in these bees, but in pretty much everything that eats meat, including humans. A large part of our gut biome is made up of lactobacillus. It's an acid-producing bacteria that helps us process stuff, but also it's one of the main jobs of it is to protect our gut biomes from pathogens that are found in meat, because meat decomposes and rots really fast because it's full of bacteria and stuff like that. And so the bees or us don't want to get sick from what we eat. And so these lactobacillus bacteria essentially pickle the pathogens that are found on our food. And it helps them survive the harsh conditions of actually eating, meat that is starting to rot. So anyway, a fun little fact, if you eat yogurt, you're eating something that's been pasteurized with lactobacillus. Thought that was kind of fun too. So back to the meat packing plant here, or the hive, whatever you want to call it. One of the species, Trigona hypogea, these bees, they fly back to the hive where they regurgitate the meat into specialized pots. Other bees have also been out foraging, but they haven't been foraging for meat. They've been foraging for sugary plant stuff. Notice that I didn't say nectar. It is not nectar that they're going after. They're going after the juices from fruits, the juices from stems, and other things like that instead of the nectar. They will regurgitate that into another pot where other bee workers that are in the hive and maintain life in the hive, they eventually will combine those two. They'll combine the regurgitated meat and they'll combine the regurgitated non-flowery plant sweetness, juice, into one pot. They'll let it air out overnight and cap it up the next day, where it then matures for about 2 weeks inside of the pot. And what you have left over is something that the meat has essentially broken down inside of the plant juices into more basic components that is made up of whatever the meat is, the proteins essentially. And you get a substance that is yellowy and kind of a viscous fluid. And it looks a lot like honey.
Meat honey.
Even been termed meat honey. But it is not honey because it is not derived from nectar. Although It does have a really sweet taste to it, but instead of being full of sugars and other things like that, like honey would be, it's full of a lot of protein. A little bit different there. And so this essentially becomes the food for the colony. And everybody eats that stuff. Now, in another species, Trigona necrophagia, or phaga, or however you want to say it, simply meaning meat eater, these workers will go out, they'll find something rotting, like our friend Sean. They'll take that meat back and they'll regurgitate it into the mouth of a worker that is at the hive. This is more akin to something that happens in, say, honeybees, where they regurgitate the nectar into the mouth of another bee. But instead of honey or nectar, this is, again, meat. Now, these bees, the ones that took in the meat, they will actually digest that meat. So they'll eat that meat. And the proteins that they get from digesting and processing that meat are then processed and released through the hypopharyngeal gland, which is located near their mouth parts. And essentially what is produced is the same type of stuff that is found and produced in bees that also have the same glands. In bees, and like honeybees, we call it royal jelly, which is just a nice protein-heavy, sweet substance that is used to feed larval bees. But instead of nectar being the main source for that, it is meat. However, it is not the meat itself. It is processed through the bee and then is released through these glands. And it's kind of a similar consistency to the royal honey, or to the royal jelly that is produced in, say, honeybees. So there you have it. Some bees that essentially go out, they'll find some meat, take some chunks, and use that. They're the only known bees in the entire world that basically evolved to have a diet that is not solely consisted of plant matter, which I thought was really cool.
Is there like a, I guess, did they evolve from bees? So bees evolved from wasps. Right. Wasps are carnivores, omnivores.
Right.
And so bees are kind of like their vegan relatives, but then did one of these vegans decide to go back and start eating meat?
So there's actually not a whole lot known about these things. Like, even the Wikipedia pages are really short. And I read some Smithsonian stuff and followed some stuff back, and it really wasn't until like the 1980s that this was actually described. I mean, indigenous people have, of course, known about these bees for a lot longer. That's usually how this type of stuff works. Yeah. But to Western science, these bees were not really heavily studied until the 1980s. And like, even some of the species weren't described until, the 1990s. They were all thought to be like one species. And then they're like, oh no, this might actually be 3 separate species. And it wasn't confirmed to like that they ate meat literally until the 1980s. I couldn't really find anything on the evolution, but from what I did kind of read about is, yes, they're still within this genus Trigona, which is just a formless version, which is a stingless bee. Mm-hmm. So they're just specialized versions of bees that have already existed. So
gotcha.
They went back to their roots. So it's back to their other hymenopteran relative roots.
Gotcha.
Like the wasps and the ants.
Gotcha. That's cool. I mean, I thought letting vultures eat my remains sounded cool. I think bees. I'd let bees eat my corpse. So turn me into some meat honey.
So in this hypothetical situation with some hypothetical entomologist named Sean.
Yeah, don't know who that is.
My transition was going to be back to our good buddy Sean, who's now just a pile of bones. These bones are then found by a magician and magically transported to East Africa.
Yeah,
So,
to get the rest of me
so,
decomposed.
so there you go. You can have both. You just need to find a magician that takes
Gotcha.
the bones that are left over and transports them to another continent.
Well,
I'll do that for you.
gotcha.
If
Cool.
you go first, I'll bring you down to Central America, let some bees eat you, and then I'll fly the rest of you over to East Africa or something.
Well, this would be a decent transition into mine, but you could also take those bones to maybe a less obvious place, but like find a deep part of the ocean. That's probably, somewhere between South America and Africa. Save you a little bit of time and just boop, drop them in the water, make sure they sink, and then it'll lead to my next, organism of discussion. So my second one isn't as obvious of a necrobiome as, anything on land, because that's where we see most things die, I guess. So,
it's like we're biased or something.
Yeah. Spencer, have you ever heard of a whale fall?
Yes.
Dude, those are so cool, in my opinion. But for those that don't know what that is, a whale fall is when a corpse or a carcass of a whale sinks to the ocean floor. When a whale dies, depending on the circumstance of death, of course, it can float for days, providing sustenance to a variety of fish, sharks, birds, and probably mammals while it remains bloated enough to remain, buoyant. But once its lungs deflate and it sinks, it becomes a form of sustenance to an entirely different ecosystem, especially when it sinks to a depth more than 3,000 feet. These large animals can take several months to several years to decompose down there, and entire ecosystems are built on the reliance of just one dead whale.
And I think, honestly, like the meat-eating bees is pretty cool, but I was waiting for you to say that fact, and that might be the fact of the podcast.
Yeah.
That there are entire ecosystems literally that rely on the luck of some giant beast floating down from their version of the sky.
Yeah. And making it, just 3,000, 5,000, 10,000 feet deep. And it probably died, at the surface.
Yeah.
So, crazy. Talk about a necrobiome, though. And I forget which book it was in now, but one of the paleontology books I have read discussed comparing whale falls to what they are coining as sauropod falls. And as you know from previous episodes, sauropods reached similar, if not larger, sizes than whales. So you can imagine the amount of organisms those bodies could have fed. I vaguely remember it discussing these massive theropods and other carnivores could likely survive on dead sauropods alone, just kind of following herds and waiting for one to die of natural causes and then hanging out around that carcass for days, weeks, maybe months. Mm-hmm. Now, those carcasses likely did not last years like dead whales. One, it would have been very hot. Earth was very warm back then, and thousands of feet under the water is very cold. So temperature helps the decomposition of carcasses. Also, the organisms attracted to dead whales, which we will get back to in a second, would have been much smaller than, let's say, an Allosaurus or a T-Rex. Oh, I thought those were carnivores, not scavengers. Shut up. like many predators today, there's a good chance they were opportunistic and wouldn't pass on an all-you-can-eat buffet of sauropod meat.
What?
They're like,
what? No, they see something dead and they're like, that's too far gone. I gotta have picky. Mine with a beating heart.
They poke it. They're like, come on, just give me a little bit of prey drive.
Move a finger. That's all I need.
Yeah. Just shake those nerves up a little bit. Get that body going. But back to whale falls. This necrobiome includes chordates, arthropods, cnidarians, echinoderms, mollusks, nematodes, annelids, etc. One example I wanted to focus on, because the name of itself is pretty sick, or the nickname is pretty sick, and goes with the theme of my previous animal, and like I said, could help with the bone remains that after the bees finish me off. They're in the genus Osedax. Osedax are deep sea polychaetes. In common tongue, as we say, they're bone worms, or zombie worms, or bone eating worms, whichever you prefer.
All of them are equally cool.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know why someone hasn't combined like zombie bone worms. Like, that's the ultimate metal worm name right there. But Osedax means bone eater. Go figure. This genus falls under the phylum of Annelida. What's an Annelida, Sean? These are segmented worms, and there are over 20,000 species. And yes, this includes earthworms and leeches. Wikipedia has 27 species of Osedax listed on their site. I will not bore you by going through each one discussing what makes
come on!
each one different than the next, but let's dive into what these worms do and how they participate in the necrobiome. These bone worms will actually bore into the bones of a whale carcass to feed on the collagen. These bore holes serve two purposes. The obvious one, to gain access to the collagen. The second is to hide or defend themselves against predators. How do they bore these holes? Well, probably not how you imagine, since I have not told you what they look like at all yet. They have a root-like appendage, not that unlike plants, that secretes an acid that dissolves bone, allowing them to take root literally in the bones. Instead of a plant, in the soil, kind of imagine this worm growing out of bones.
That kind of hurts to think about.
Yeah, I
know it doesn't do it to.
I'm glad that one, they prefer dead things, and two, they're very deep underwater. But this acid also frees up or releases the fats within the bones to be absorbed. But they do not have a mouth and must rely on a symbiotic relationship with bacteria, which will absorb these fatty nutrients instead. How the nutrients then get back into the worm is kind of still up for debate, though. Maybe the worms absorb the bacteria, or the waste produced from the bacteria absorbing the bone fat is absorbable for the worm. It's really not super clear right now. I mean, the worms themselves were only recently discovered, and their relationship with the bacteria is still being looked into. The bacteria is actually called Oceanospirales. Wow, I mean, that was something I practiced, and I still don't think I hit it, but it sounded pretty good, right?
I would have taken your word for it.
Yeah,
it was smooth.
And I'm not going to try it again because I will butcher it the second time. But at the other end of the worm is a trunk-like appendage that ends with a feather-like gills that absorbs oxygen. So yeah, it's a worm that has a feathery end and another end similar to plant roots that helps dissolve whale bones. The deep sea is one strange place. Something super cool about this zombie worm, as if nothing I have said so far isn't already cool, is that the sexual dimorphism is very clear, with females being more than 20,000 times larger than males as they go through something called, which I didn't even know was a thing yet, called environmental sexual determination. So our sexual determination, I know you discussed this briefly in a previous episode, more or less comes into play with chromosomes. Females are only 2.5 centimeters, by the way, so like thinking back about that 20,000 times larger than males thing, the males are absolutely microscopic.
Yeah. So, dude, they must have a relay system. They're like taking the bacteria and they're like hand feeding it to the females. That's what I'm picturing. They use little shovels. They shovel the bacteria.
I'm not like the males.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not even sure the males do anything other than just serve as like sperm donors. Kind of like anglerfish, how once they mate, the male just becomes like a part of the female's body, and there's like kind of smaller version of, like, they look like a tumor, like attached to the female, but I'm not even sure you'd see the males on zombie worms. But the females release hundreds of eggs daily that develop into larvae. If a larva comes into contact with a bone, it becomes female. If it comes into contact with a female, it becomes male. So, and it remains in this larval stage and serves as a sperm donor, sperm packet for the rest of its life. And that's what the environmental sexual determination thing means. Like, I had never heard of that. Like, what sex you become is entirely based off of, like, what you run into.
The first thing that you smack into.
Yeah. Like, that's crazy. But a whale carcass can have multiple species of bone worms living on it, and there could be hundreds, even thousands of individuals releasing millions of eggs into the ocean to spread out looking for, these new bone biomes to dissolve, because you're not just going to have, like, one area. I mean, hopefully not. Maybe there's, like, a mass graveyard, like mass elephant graveyard, but, like, a mass whale graveyard. That would be, like, the jackpot for these bone worms. Yeah. But bone worms were first discovered on whale carcasses, but have since been described on a variety of other oceanic organisms. Scientists have also begun looking back in the fossil record to see if they evolved alongside whales or if they could see them earlier. Turns out there is fossil evidence of them 110 million years ago residing on plesiosaur bones. So it turns out they kind of evolved alongside just these large marine reptiles, and then as they died out, you could see them on other organisms like marine turtles, marine birds, and until eventually they evolved furthermore alongside whales. But it's also a bit sad to think about because they have contributed to a lack of oceanic fossils since they have been devouring them from becoming fossils for the last 100 million years. These bastards, Not only do they break down bone and take part in the necrobiome, but they're also referred to as an ecosystem engineer through their boreholes. These holes welcome or invite other amphipods, crabs, and gastropods to take up residence, kind of like how a beaver can change an ecosystem and new species can inhabit the area, or gopher tortoises, since we recently talked about them as well. So bone worms might be a little bit more metal than bearded vultures even, but they're like... oh man, they're so worm. Interesting.
With all of our listeners out there, please make a band called Zombie Bone Worms.
Zombie Bone Worms.
That's incredible. Oh my gosh.
So yeah, and you could have your bones swallowed by a bird or bored into by worms. And
so, I mean, would they go after something that's like cartilaginous, like a large shark? But sharks live generally in shallower water. So
but you do have I guess they've seen them on like whale sharks, because that's a pretty big animal.
Yeah, okay.
And those can drop. So I think they've found them on those as well. So
so that it doesn't have to just be like a bone type of thing.
I think they mentioned they found them on a certain type of ray, maybe like a large ray. But now, so because whale falls are so rare to find, there's some scientists that'll, after a whale has died or beached itself, they'll actually like purposefully drop them in locations to create a whale fall so that they can study it more.
Oh yeah, that's pretty cool. That's a way to do it.
And I think these bone worms are found throughout like all the oceans.
Yeah. Well, I guess anywhere where the whales might be. Yeah. So that's incredible.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, underwater necrobiomes are like an entirely different concept.
And it's like you said, it seems to be so much slower.
Oh yeah. I mean, you're talking about very cold temperatures, so if nothing finds it, like that could be like almost preserved for decades if nothing gets to it.
I mean, yeah. I mean, even longer than that. I mean, like there are trees that are preserved at the bottom of lakes up in the boundary waters that are hundreds and hundreds of years old.
Oh yeah. So. And I think like these these whale falls actually go through phases. The scientists have described different phases of them, and at some point, there's like dangerous chemicals that are given off that you have to be very specialized to continue feeding off of it. And I think the bacteria that help the bone worms like get through that, like they can survive in this like basically a toxic environment. Crazy stuff.
I didn't have any more that obviously we shared, so we got 3 in today.
Nice.
But I did want to highlight something that's started this weekend. Went out yesterday looking for them and found hundreds. We lost count. But it is time for this area. So I'm in the Sandwich area of Cape Cod, and there is a nice population about, just coming out this weekend and over the next couple weeks or so of our 17-year periodical cicadas.
Oh,
so
very cool.
We are about to get blasted with cicadas for the next month.
Nice.
We
talked about those on this podcast.
We have, yeah. So that's kind of what I want to talk about it. So we went out yesterday. I went out with a little group to do a little hike to look for them. I was like, I haven't seen any around camp. I live in the forest, and I was like, I haven't seen any around. But they generally like to emerge after a big rainstorm, which had happened Friday. And so I was like, okay. So we found 2, and we're like, oh yeah, they're out. And there are these black ones with the red eyes that sometimes people think are a little creepy looking. But the longer we hiked, oh my God, there's so many of them. Were they in
a grassy area or a woods, like a forest?
Woods.
Okay.
Yeah, like wooded forests. Because they specialize on deciduous trees.
Gotcha.
And other, like fruit-bearing trees essentially. So although, so that's mainly where you're going to find them. That's why these cicadas, you're typically not going to find them in, pine-dominated forests or whatever.
Gotcha.
So, but yeah, there was a lot, and they're they're getting ready, and I'm super excited. I don't know. I mean, there was one thing that said certain species of 17-year cicada, they can, like in a given square mile, you can have like millions of them. So I'm hoping that it's the same here. And
are you going to look for the salt, pepper, and shaker fungal infections?
Oh yeah, I should do that, shouldn't I?
Yeah. I forgot to mention, I started my own necrobiome this weekend. I got some dermestid beetles, and I have a dead raccoon, and we're gonna see how it goes.
Can I send you?
No.
Of course, it's in Iowa. You what? All right, fine then. You don't want a star-nosed vole skull, mole skull to
cool.
process with your dermestids?
How are you going to send me that?
It's been preserved in alcohol for
nice. Okay.
like 2 years, so you just have to dry it out.
I was like, that's going to smell bad.
Nope. It's all dried out, or it's still in the alcohol. So take it out, dry it out, and then throw it in.
Cool.
But is this something you're doing at home?
Yeah, which I wish I wasn't, because it smells real bad. I don't have a great setup to prevent that. So
yeah.
I got a Tupperware. I'm trying to keep it in a dark area, kind of insulated.
Nice.
Threw in some animal bedding, and then the thing is, I had the raccoon for about a week before I had the beetles, so
yummy.
That has been a delight to have around.
Did you process the raccoon any before you threw it in there, or just threw the whole gosh darn thing?
I threw the whole thing. Now that might have been wrong, but I'm going to learn.
I just know that if the hair's on it, it takes longer.
Oh, I'm not on a schedule
and not in any hurry.
Yeah.
So dude, that's sweet. So are you planning on like just building a raccoon skeleton, or just want the skull, or?
Yeah, I guess we'll see. I would like the whole thing, but the skull for sure, and see where we go from there. And no, I did not kill this raccoon, so
As a vegan, I figured, and I know you're saying that for the listeners.
Yeah.
But Sean would never kill something.
That's I'm gonna repurpose what is already dead.
Yes, that's so funny that you did that, because I was thinking about doing the same, but I was like, I don't really have a setup for it right now. And it's not like I can do it at the barn and just have, hey kids, hey campers, here's the aquarium tank with domestic beetles. Ignore the rotting skunk carcass in there. But if I move out into the forest, I might, a little farther off the campgrounds, I might do that. But it probably wouldn't be for a little while. So.
And I have a setup in like a tote, but I think if it goes well, or maybe if it doesn't go well, I guess I'd really like to get some freezers, like a big chest freezer, maybe an old one that someone's trying to get rid of and barely works or doesn't work even, because I don't need it to freeze. I just want that to store them, and it's really easy to turn that into something well insulated because it's kind of already insulated, and turn it into something that can just house a corpse and beetles and a little bit more environmental control, I guess.
Yeah. Oh, well, let me know how it goes, and take notes, because I'll want to get something like that started.
Well, cool. Okay. That was a fun episode.
Yeah. And we'll start planning the next one. So
sounds good.
Awesome. Well, we'll end it here. How?
How?